was a bit more bolshy when I was younger, so I sort of turned around and said, Steve, is there a problem? He went, no, not really. I said, are you referring to the fact that I'm laughing and joking? He went, might be. I said, well, you've got two choices, Steve. Would you like me to fix this problem in 3 hours or in under an hour? He said, well, obviously under an hour. Great. Let me carry on laughing and joking because I'll be more creative. I'll come up with the answers. If you want me to sit in here in sheer terror and worry about the consequences of this line stopping, it'll take you 3 hours. That's what you're witnessing. I fixed it in 45 minutes. And it took me, I wasn't until in my 40s when I was speaking to an expert on stress, and he said, when you get stressed, because of your fight and flight system, it diverts blood in all sorts of interesting places. So it takes blood away from your prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking things. So your IQ drops 10 or 15 points. I don't know about you. I can't afford to lose that. So I was like horrified. And it also does the thing that we're familiar with. Sometimes you forget things, or you like this nervous because it focuses on the last time you were in this same jeopardy and gives you that memory to help you get out of the pickle that you're in, which is of no practical use in the modern world. And it's also things like suppresses your immune system, and that's why your digestive system sometimes feel a bit icky because it affects that. But yeah, so I realised actually having stressed people reduces your creativity and productivity. You're actually damaging the output of the business.
Earlier this year, we spent a month or so discussing resilience. It's still a hot topic in the workplace and in leadership. And so my guest today is Matt Sturgess. He is the Mindlocksmith. He helps leaders and managers overcome anxiety, stress, hopefully to avoid burnout, helps them build mental resilience. Essentially, helps them unlock the power of the mind, hence the phrase, the business name. It's a clever one, actually. I quite like it. Before doing what he does now, Matt began his career as a self-described curious engineer. He later became a CEO, MD. He's an author as well. So we'll be hearing about all of those experiences and more. We'll hear about his book. We'll hear about what he does today. We'll hear about why these issues are relevant to leaders today, as well as the many leadership lessons that he has learned over the years, including turning around toxic cultures and what we can do to avoid their creation in the first place. Plenty of stuff to get stuck into here for any leader, particularly if you are also a business founder. So don't miss out on this episode.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Matt, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show. Looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you, David. Yeah, no, it's good. It should be very interesting and good fun, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we already got lost in our last conversation and we weren't even recording that one. So.
Yeah. Maybe we should have recorded that one, but hey.
Yeah, I say that every time, but never mind. Maybe one day. Right, so the place we start really is over to you. Tell everyone a bit about your career so far, what you do today and why you do it.
Okay, oh, great, interesting. So I started life as an engineer because I'm incredibly curious, which unfortunately for my brother meant I took his toys apart to see how they worked and couldn't always put them back together again, which he still reminds me about. So electronics was my thing. But then, as I often did, I got into other things, so loudspeakers, which I knew nothing about. So I designed the first TV surround sound speakers, and then, by a big surprise to me, got into sales. I had to do a marketing diploma, which was really confusing after doing an engineering degree, where there's an answer to everything and it's to 4 decimal places, and then suddenly marketing was a whole new world of possibilities. So I call it dual nationality. So then ended up sort of going up in different businesses, automotive, aerospace, white goods, all sorts of different technical manufacturing businesses. Ended up eventually being sales director and then MD and CEO. So did a Warwick MBA along the way. So I did a huge amount of business stuff and also was part of a peer-to-peer learning group, but then became fascinated with this, the most powerful bit of technology we've got, our minds. Nobody gave us a user guide, and it's not as intuitive to use as an iPhone. So I got into that and had a bit of a breakthrough during COVID, helped a friend out and wrote a book about it. So now I don't really like the term resilience because it sounds like you're a boxer and you're going to tough things out. I prefer to call it bounceability. But I help people understand what is actually going on up here in a very simple way, and help them manage stress, anxiety, fear, but in a sort of a business setting. So that's basically what I do now. So a bit of a change.
Yeah, I mean, quite a journey there. I mean, as engineer to marketing, as if that wasn't enough of a change, you then had 3 more. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I still remember the marketing exam questions. I'm thinking they're so open, and from an engineering point of view, where things are very precise and precision, I thought, I just can't get my head around this. So, it took me a few years to equate to that. But
yeah. I mean, you obviously did though, so that's the main thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and sales was fun. Because before, when I thought sales was a sort of a dirty word, and that's why I never wanted to be in sales. But the sales director at the time, when I was an engineer, said to me, "No, it's what you're already doing." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, the customer says to me, I want a speaker this big, and I want it to cost X, and your first response is, well, what problem do you want to solve?" And he said, "That's what sales is about." So I used to just say, "Well, do you want your car to go faster?" Because we were supplying to the automotive industry, so is weight important? Do you want a premium sound so it sounds fantastic so you can charge more for your car? What do you actually want? And it was quite fascinating. Quite often, a lot of the customers didn't know. They said, "Well, somebody just told me I need to have a speaker this big." Okay, well, what do you really want to do? "Oh, I don't know. Let's go and have a chat with someone." And you get into all sorts of interesting conversations. And that I found actually was, one, it was fun. It was just naturally me. But actually, that was better from a sales point of view because you start to build relationships and partnerships, which is something I've done a lot of. So we dealt with Ford Motor Company at the time, and I'm sure they've changed now. But at the time, their approach to negotiating was if you're still moving at the end of a negotiation, then they haven't probably done it properly. So it was quite brutal. But I genuinely turned it into a partnership, and the industry I was in at the time sort of turned it on its head, so which resulted in us getting 10% increase in profits year on year for 6 years, and the customer's happy, so everyone's happy.
Yeah, everyone's happy. That's got to be the goal, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite interesting. First of all, that you thought sales was a dirty word. Like, I hear that a lot, and I mean, I've spoken to quite a few like sales experts and sales coaches and that sort of person as well. And I'm still not sure where that negative stereotype comes from, other than maybe like the used car salesman of the 80s, or maybe like the what was it, like the double glazing salespeople.
Yes, yeah. I think you're right. I think because our brain notices negativity as a survival thing, because that's more useful than positive things are of no value survival wise. So one guy described it as negativity is like Velcro, positivity is like Teflon. It's of no use to you. So I think we notice the poor sales experiences, and we probably label that in our head as, oh, that's. In fact, it's interesting. Our daughter's just buying a second car. And we had the extremes of sales experiences, some really great people and some you're thinking, really, you're not doing your profession any good. So, I guess it's that negative experience often sticks, unfortunately, more than the positive one.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting insight as well, given your specialism these days. I mean, it's a shame, though, because I feel like even in like the car salesperson kind of arena, I think the vast majority these days are as far from that stereotype as possible, because it doesn't work. So they stopped doing it.
Definitely. And I think one of the other stereotypes you sometimes get with sales is if you talk a lot, you can be good at sales. For me, it was always the complete opposite. Genuinely listen to what people want, help them explore and understand that themselves. And I think probably also silence was the most powerful negotiation tool. A number of times you show somebody the price and you'd expect the normal, it's too expensive and all that. You get a response like that and just say nothing. It's really awkward, but it's really odd how they then undo their own argument. So they start saying, oh, well, maybe it's not as expensive compared to the other person, or what you do. Oh, actually, and you just keep quiet. And they undo their own sort of negatives. So it's quite fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of parallels, I think, in between this and leadership generally, but that in particular is a new one, is that power of silence sometimes. And it doesn't have to be to just let someone like talk their way out of something. Sometimes it's just like that space to think, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think also it's quite often attached to people like myself with an engineering background that tend to be slightly more introverted. Is sometimes there's more silence from people like that, people like me, because I'm thinking so much. So some people might think, well, he's got nothing to say. Actually, there's a lot here. And if you just give someone permission and just politely say, well, what do you think? I've noticed you're thinking about something. And then suddenly they just share something with you and you think, wow, you've been thinking about this for the last half hour, whatever it is, 2 hours whilst everyone else has been talking, and you've really understood it. There was somebody I used to work with in Germany. It was brilliant at doing that. He'd laugh and joke about things and then suddenly give out a brilliant answer. I think, where did that come from? So, no, silence is a powerful thing.
Absolutely. Just going to leave a moment of silence. No. So, I mean, let's talk more about what you do today. So how did you get into that? Tell us. I know there's a story behind it, so please share the story.
I say I'm deeply curious and I enjoy helping people. Those are the two parts of my character that are really strong. So I'd read for about 10 years about how the mind works, was just fascinated by it, as I said, because it's the most powerful bit of kit we've got. I wrote 3 books worth of material but published nothing. And at the time we were living in Shropshire, and a friend reached out to me during COVID and said, look, and he's happy for me to share the story. He said, you don't know, he said, but I had a childhood trauma, always been on my shoulders. Every couple of years it floors me. And he trained himself in all sorts of psychological techniques, from the more understandable to the more interesting, should we say. Gone on all sorts of courses, and he said, nothing's ever worked. So I said, I don't know. He said, you're into all this mind stuff. So I said, well, let's start with a walk. So we just went for a walk for 1 hour in the snow, and I shared with him one idea I had buried in the back of one of my unpublished books, which is fun to do and it's habit-based. So I shared this with him, and I saw him the next day, and I called him Tigger because he was just jumping around. I mean, he was about 65 at the time. I said, I've been doing this thing. It's really fun, isn't it? I said, well, that's part of the point of it. Otherwise, you'd never do it. And then he really threw me, because 2 weeks later, he said to me, I've been doing this, as you said, 5 minutes every day. I've now chosen to go back to my childhood memories because they're not painful anymore. Now, that word chosen, I think, is important. And also the fact it had that effect on him so quickly. And the bonus, he said, is I'm remembering the good bits that I forgot about. So he said, for goodness sake, do more of this stuff, get on with it, and because you just need to do it. And I thought, well, blimey, that's a bit. And I'm not a particularly profound person, nor's he. And I thought, God, that's really. And he said also, how come this has worked and all the other stuff I've done hasn't? I said to him, well, it's quite simple, really. And I always try and, I suppose, the engineer in me to simplify things. So I drew two lines in the snow for him with my foot. And I said, imagine the first line is like a train track. And that's the neural pathway that represents the trauma that you went through. And nearly all the techniques you went through got you to relive that again and again, re-examine it in lots of different ways, and just made it deeper. Made it deeper and stronger. As if you just take it down, take the emotion away, it's a electrochemical pathway in your brain. We've just created a new one based on unconditional love, because I understood how the mind works. Whether something's real or imagined, part of your brain behaves the same way. So you can create your own story of that. So I said, when you get to that junction in the middle and you feel like you're going down this way, we'll end up going down this way because you choose to, and it's more fun. Metaphorically speaking, that neural pathway will get stronger and this one will grow weeds on it. It's still there, still part of who you are, which is important, the learning from it, but this one becomes the natural pathway. And he said, it's just so obvious. I said, I know. But all the other therapy keeps taking you down this path constantly, re-examine it, making it stronger. So there's some other bits and bobs to it, but so I ended up writing. It took me a while, but I eventually wrote a book about that, nuclear-powered resilience. And it's got lots of other things in there about how the brain works, but also goes through that technique. So yeah, that sort of. And then I thought, actually, he's right. I'm deeply curious. I've done that bit about understanding the brain, still learn. I just need to help people. That's what I've always wanted to do. So yeah, took the brave decision 2.5 years ago to go out on my own.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story, and a great to hear that you've had that impact as well. Or even if, it's one of these things, and I kind of feel the same about the work that I try to do with leaders anyway. If you've just made a difference to one person, then that's enough, isn't it? Like that's all you set out to do.
Yeah.
And anything beyond that is just extra and great.
I'm going to call that aha moments when you get that, something you've said, shared, done, that somebody else has realised something different about themselves, or it's enabled them to do something or think differently, whatever it is. That's what I call the aha moment. And when you get those, they're quite precious, aren't they? And you can see the expression on someone's face. You think, right, this is now, it's going to be different in a good way going forwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And that point as well about remembering the good parts. I mean, that's ringing bells in my head, because, we've all had, maybe not to that level of severity. We've all had things in our lives, in our careers, that we don't really like to think about. It was an unpleasant time.
Yeah.
And so you just don't think about it. You avoid acknowledging it. And I think this point about you losing the good with the bad, it's the baby out with the bathwater, I suppose, to use the cliche.
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes I do force myself to think about some of those negative experiences, because alongside those, there were some really great times, like some people that I'm still friends with that I would never have met otherwise, and things like this. And it's important, I think, to reflect on those good memories. And thinking back again to what you said at the beginning about when we were talking about sales and stereotypes, about the human brain remembers the negative much more easily. I think that's why it matters, I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's and also there's also, in those difficult moments, there's also huge learning as well that we need to capture and acknowledge as well. But no, you're right. I mean, there's various. I do all sorts of workshops and things like that. So one of my workshops called Happy Habits, which is actually trains people to how the brain works, so they can notice more positive things. And some things are really simple. So I started 7 and a bit years now writing a gratitude log every night. So I just get a little book with some lines in it, put today's date, and put 3 things I'm grateful for in it. And I've been doing that now for, about 7 years. I think I've just started my 6th book. So it's a bit of a family thing now. They quite often get me one with some pictures on it and stuff. And it's really, it sounds odd, but when you write things down like that, there's a couple of things that are going on. One, if it's the last thing you do before you go to sleep, you're priming your brain with something positive rather than worrying about an issue. It makes you start to think about those things, and there's a key part in your brain that notices things. So when you start thinking about buying another car, you start noticing that. So when you start noticing gratitude, it's a signal to your brain, find me more of this stuff, start noticing more of that. So it actually sort of helps you from that point of view. You can also, when you get really difficult moments, go back to your gratitude book and give yourself proof in your handwriting that life isn't quite as bad as you think, because sometimes the brain goes, oh, this always goes wrong. Oh, this, especially where we add everything and everyone in our language, and there's proof. So it takes a bit of, once you sort of get going, but there's a lot of science behind it, which is what I quite like, because as a sort of somewhat lapsed engineer, I'm a little bit skeptical. So I thought, this gratitude stuff, it's all great, but really, Is it just happy slappy? But actually, it actually strengthens as a part of your brain called the ACC, the rational part, that gets stronger. And it actually reduces the effect of the amygdala, which is your fight and fight system. So it actually stands it down a bit. So you're less likely to get stressed as quickly and triggered. So just little things like that actually make quite a profound change. So yeah, my Happy Habits workshop has all sorts of stuff like that in it, but it's all practical, real stuff. It's not disingenuous stuff. It's things you can really do and make a difference.
Yeah, no, I like that. And it as you're explaining it struck me that might be quite a good thing for imposter syndrome as well.
Yes. No, it's interesting you say that.
Which is relevant for leaders, of course, which is why I mentioned it.
Yeah. I've just developed actually a new program about imposter syndrome and what it really is and how to deal with it, which I did a little trial with a group of 38 leaders recently and got very good feedback. So yeah, no, it's I mean, one of the big parts with imposter syndrome that I quite often describe, if I tell you a very short story, my nan was 98 when she died. And I remember having a chat with her. Saying, what's it like now to be that old? 98. I was a teenager at the time. And she said, up here, I've always been 17 and I still am. And I thought about that and I thought, I've always been about 40. so I'm getting younger every day. And I thought, that's interesting. And little things like sometimes you watch something on the telly and they say so-and-so and so-and-so did this and their age is such. My wife and I will look at this and think, blimey, they're older than us. And although the same age, we don't know that. Surely we don't. And I think that's because what I refer to, we've got an inner selfie. We've got an image of who we think we are that's quite often stuck in time, of what we think we're capable of. And a bit like software in a computer, it doesn't get updated very often. So and our brain likes to keep consistent and hold us to what it thinks. So it's got the inner selfie, and it's then looking at a goal you've got and says, right, to do this goal, you need skill X, Y, Z, which is over here. But your inner selfie, you're over here. No, we're keeping you back over here. We're not wandering off over there. That's ridiculous. This is who you are. So one of the key parts is about updating your inner selfie, so it's more in line with your goals and your ambitions and where you are. And another thing that I sort of discovered is we often ignore some of the things we're naturally good at. Because we're naturally good at them, they're obvious to us, so obvious they're of no value. We think that's so obvious, surely everyone knows that. So I've not done it yet, but I've often described an experiment. If I've got 100 people in a room, got them to really relax and write down genuinely what they find utterly easy to do, just so straightforward, they don't have to think about it, doesn't take any energy. Write it all down on a bit of paper and then circulate all those bits of paper around the room. Somebody else would pick up your bit of paper and say, you find that easy? That's incredible. I'd pay you to do that. That sucks the life out of me just thinking about it. It's a bit like, me being an engineer and stuff, numbers and all that. I find that simple. For other people, it's like, oh, God, what's the word maths and oh. So we tend to ignore the things we're naturally good at, yet that's innately us and enables us to do things. So that's another aspect of, I think, imposter syndrome. Ridiculously, it's a bit like a bit of furniture that you see in the house all the time. You just walk past it, you just ignore it because it's always been there. It's like, well, everyone's got one of those, haven't they?
Yeah, I feel like that 100 people in a room thing needs to happen because everyone would come away with that with more business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, and that's one of the sort of things in leadership that I think I learned fairly early on. You're innately good at certain things. There's some things that take a lot more energy. Yes, sometimes you have to do them. You've got to get over that. But actually, there's a lot of people around you that have innately got that skill. Go and have a chat with them because they'll be delighted that you've spoken to them, acknowledged them, trusted them to do something. makes your life a damn sight easier, because you think, well, you're just brilliant and you'll do this in half an hour. It'll take me 2 days and I still won't be happy with it. So yeah, there's a huge parallel in leadership with that, I think, and just life in general, but maybe sometimes with your family, community. I don't know if you're in a church group, social group, or whatever other setting you've got. So
yeah, I think that's the real power of leadership, isn't it? Is being able to collate all these many skills of different people and kind of direct it towards a greater good somehow, in whatever shape or form that takes. And I think that's where a lot of leaders get really stuck, isn't it? Is in this sort of older mindset, older in terms of historical, not their age. I should clarify, not being ageist about it.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's that sort of traditional, more old-fashioned thinking of like the leader, their responsibilities, knowing the answers, knowing how to do all the things, imparting all the knowledge, and they can't ever possibly rely on anyone else. And I think this is quite closely linked to imposter syndrome as well, because that's where we get ourselves into this, stuck in the wrong trench in the snow, if you like.
Yeah, no, very much so. No, I think it's a very good point. I mean, I found when I sort of first got into leadership, partly because the way I was sort of brought up, you've got to find a solution yourself. Just get on with it. Don't think you're going to have to necessarily get it from someone else. You've got to find it for yourself. So it was normal for me to find solutions. So I thought when I was a leader, I had to come up with all the answers. So I tried my best to do that. Sometimes I was good at it, sometimes I wasn't. And then I realised actually I'm denying everybody else the possibility of doing that for me. And I'm denying everyone else the opportunity for me to demonstrate clear trust that, I'm going to trust you to get on and do that. So that was quite a thing for me to let go. It was quite natural for me to notice great things in people. So I found that bit easy. That was already sort of there, and talk to people and have very open conversations. But to actually let go and think, no, I've just got to let you come up with it, and actually just ask people to come up with solutions. I think you're right. It's I had the worst boss ever at one stage, the boss from hell. But I'm aware that their biggest thing was they couldn't trust anyone, and they did share something with me in their past, and I can understand why that it comes back to trauma again, without a doubt, had a traumatic effect on them. They wouldn't maybe have acknowledged that, so they were unable to trust going forwards, and they carried that into work. They were just a micromanaging, very unpleasant person. So it can have that effect, but when you actually trust people, what a huge compliment that is. And you just unleash their capability.
Yeah, and I think it's essential as well if you want to succeed as a leader.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult thing to do as a leader is to be that person who trusts first. Now, for me, like I've always found that trusting bit really easy. The bit I always really struggled with was the letting go to the point of, if people make mistakes, that's okay. And I think part of that was because I had a pretty terrible boss at the time as well.
Yeah.
And so that environment, that culture we were all working within made mistakes not okay. But yeah, so to your point again, like, being able to let go and to trust people, and you mentioned all great benefits of doing that. The other one is, of course, giving them that freedom to make mistakes and that ability to learn, because that's what mistakes are really, isn't it? It's learning opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. So to that point, I mean, innovation's been a big part of my life. One, as an engineer doing it, one managing R&D and product development teams, and then as part of my MBA dissertation, I did a research on how to create a culture and environment for innovation. So making mistakes and allowing mistakes, obviously not the same one twice, but are key. So one of my favourite quotes is from James Joyce. I think he's famous for other things. Is mistakes are the portals of discovery.
That's cool. I like that.
Mistakes are the portals of discovery. That says it all to me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's lots of wonderful stories about Edison, isn't there? Saying I didn't. Some people say, you spent 1,000 attempts at making a light bulb, and his answer was, I found 1,000 ways it wouldn't work. which I think equally are great. But for me, mistakes are the portals of discovery. Just is so eloquent, and so it just sort of says it all.
It's very cool. I'm not so sure about the Edison one though, because didn't he steal the idea from someone else? I've read.
Yes.
Were those 1,000 ideas really his, or was he just really good at PR?
No, you're right. Yeah, there's been a few like that, hasn't there? Even the theory of evolution. I can't remember. There's another chap that actually did most of the work and doesn't get the credit for it. Yeah.
That's a funny one.
Right. It's and I suppose the other thing that sort of tells into that is culture. So actually, although I realised I was pre-biased, but it was 20,000 word dissertation. I found that hard work doing this research for my dissertation. But ultimately, it came down to culture was the key thing to enable innovation and creating cultures where it is okay to make mistakes. What are you going to learn from it? In fact, make more mistakes faster, fail faster. So my other experience with culture was actually my first job after I graduated was we had a brilliant culture, interdepartment help, support, and then we had a new MD come in and destroyed it within 6 months, created silos of don't speak to them and all this sort of nonsense. I thought, my God, I wonder if it's possible to do the opposite in the same sort of time frame. Well, I think my proudest achievement in business was I did it in 5 months. So I came in as a new CEO, inherited a toxic culture. It was really horrible, losing money. Within 5 months, I turned it around into a really positive, wonderful culture, and also we turned around the profitability. So from losing a couple of £100,000 to making a profit of a couple of £100,000. So that was fascinating, because culture is something we've all experienced, either a good one or a bad one. We can describe the absence of it, a good one, but sometimes it's difficult to actually describe what culture is. So, that's a whole fascinating subject, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's funnily enough, my master's dissertation was also about culture, not from the innovation angle, more from the leadership side of it. And I very much focused. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd gone the other way, but it was about like defining toxic culture and what you can do to avoid it. I wish I'd done it the other way around. I wish I'd defined positive culture and what you can do to build it. But it's two sides of the same coin, I guess. But yeah, maybe I'll do another one just for fun. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, but it is funny, isn't it, how often those two concepts of profitability and good culture arrive at the same time. And and
I think in particularly more so in this modern world as well, it's difficult to retain really good people. There's lots more options that people can do doing their own thing as well as moving into other businesses. So that culture's become even more important, I think. And it's also a way of attracting great people as well, because if it's really, everyone loves this company, it's a great place to be, culture's brilliant, people think, maybe I can get a job, and the best people want to go there.
I agree. I also think, though, a lot of businesses are being slightly disingenuous about that when they put job ads out, because they've realised that good culture is how you attract good people. Yeah. And so they want to present it even if it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think there's what I would refer to as culture distortion.
Yes.
I.e., you get lots of extra free holidays, you get free sweets, you get this, it's all lovely, it's wonderful. You're thinking, okay, that's just stuff. It's not culture. That's just stuff.
Yeah.
What really is going on? If I walked into your business, I've often done this actually when I've gone to so many different customers and suppliers. You can normally tell the minute you walk into reception what the culture's like. You can tell the people in reception, how they interact, what the conversation's like, what the decor's like. I mean, I remember one buyer I used to see when he said, whenever I do an audit, of any factory. So the first place I go into is the reception toilet, whether I need to or not. It tells me everything I need to know about how they look after the business. It's a great point.
It's an interesting test. Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I think there's a lot of, as you say, culture. I call it culture distortion. But for me, it's that. Does everyone know what the purpose of the business is? Are the values clear? Are they lived? I did a workshop a little while ago actually on culture, and I put a slide up with 3 pictures on it. And I said to everyone, what are these pictures of? And everyone's looking at these slides thinking, I think he's lost it. I'm thinking, I could see the expression on their face. And then one bloke said, well, I think they're pictures of wallpaper, aren't they? I said, yeah, otherwise known as your business values. Because they're plastered on the wallpaper. You walk past them every day. You ignore them. You never refer to them except when there's a QS 9000 audit once a year. And he went, oh, guilty. And I went into one business once. They had 3 values. Safety was one of them. Great. It was the bottom one. Surely it should be the top one. Because if it's not a safe environment, then the other 2 don't really matter. Because no one's going to turn up. No one's going to be bothered. So yeah, it's having a clear purpose, understanding what your values are, and attitudes and behaviours were the key thing for me. So
So I mean, going back to like the concept of culture and how we define it, I think that's where the problem starts, isn't it? Almost is because it's not, as you said, it's not well understood unless it's gone wrong, and then it's really easy. And even then, I think you're not necessarily defining it or talking about culture as such. What you're doing is describing the symptoms of a bad one. So like, people aren't engaged, there's high turnover of staff, there's shouting matches in the office, none of those things on their own really are the culture. They're just, this is what we're seeing from a bad culture.
Yeah.
And it's something, I mean, I struggle to define it. I've written a dissertation about it and I still don't really know how to define it, but some definitions I've heard, one that really sticks out to me that I really like because it's simple is it's a descriptive phrase almost. You ask someone of what their culture is in the organisation, and it's the way we do things around here. And it's oversimple, but also it's spot on in a lot of ways because you can apply that to almost anything. Like, how do we deal with each other? That's the culture. How do we deal with customers? That's the culture. What do we do when things go wrong? That's the culture. What do we do when things go right? That's the culture as well. That one speaks to me. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I would just add one slight twist to that. Is put it in a slightly different context. It's those interactions, but what happens when the boss isn't there?
Yeah,
because sometimes it depends on the business. The boss can either set they do set the tone. The leader does cast the biggest shadow, but if it's a forced culture. And therefore, when they're there, they operate this way. But when they're not there, it operates this way. Then that's not actually the equilibrium, if you like, the true culture, because it's being distorted by the boss. But if the culture's the same when the boss is there and not there, and it's got all the things that you were talking about there, then you're onto a winner because that's embedded. It's not dependent on one person being there.
Yeah, interestingly, my primary experience of that phenomenon has been probably the opposite to how you might expect. When the boss was present, the toxic was horrible, really. Like, it was really horrible culture. As soon as that person wasn't there,
everyone went.
We found this lovely equilibrium where everyone worked really well together. Everything was collaborative. We had great conversations. We got things done. Yeah. And I've worked in a couple of cultures like that. And it's funny because you might expect it the other way around, where the boss is trying to impose this culture, but it only really works when they're there. And as soon as they're gone, everyone defaults to, I don't know, infighting or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. So in your example, probably the default culture is what it was really truly like when the boss wasn't there. That was naturally what people wanted, and that's what they saw as being normal and a natural sort of equilibrium of things, but then they forced it in a different direction when they were there with that. What have you done? Why haven't you done this? What's going on? And all that lovely behaviour.
Yeah, it was quite a telling example. I mean, as I say, it's been a couple of workplaces I've encountered like that. And I think in both cases, actually, it was how quickly and how easily, relatively speaking, that an otherwise generally quite good culture can just go completely out the window, down the toilet, whichever you prefer, just by like one or two interactions of let's call them a toxic individual, because I think that's what they were in hindsight. And it was just little things like the micromanagement or the calling someone out for a mistake in front of the whole team and things like that. And it just utterly ruins the tone. And that's all everyone's thinking or talking about for the rest of the week.
Yeah, I remember a conversation I had a year ago, and I was talking to a business that had gone to a lot of effort to try and embed values in the business and do really good things, and had a sort of cultural team and stuff. I sort of had a chat with someone. I said, so how's that going on the whole? Well, most of the time it's quite good. Well, and they sort of went like that. So explain a bit more. Well, our values, a couple of the senior team don't bother with them. They don't live them. So we're not sure now. I'm thinking that's important. So I always made it clear the values are for everyone. In fact, what I used to say to people quite openly and deliberately as a leader, you have absolute permission to hold me accountable to the values if you don't think I'm following them. Don't worry about my title or what it is. It doesn't really matter a damn to me. Everyone should hold everyone accountable to the values of the business. We truly believe that's what they are. So again, leaders in particular have got to model them, because that does cast that big shadow. So that's a massive. I mean, the message basically is, right, you lot, you follow these rules, right? But me, I'm different. I'm special. Well, I can do whatever I want. You think, really?
I mean, that's not leadership, is it?
No, not in the slightest. And I mean, in the same way as you said, one individual can twist it. It's not always the leader as well. So
True.
A phrase I learnt from somebody else was, "What terrorists have you got in your organisation?" And you know what? When they said that, I immediately thought, "Oh, it's him and it's her." Straight away, I thought, and I was thinking, "Hang on, I've got terrorists in my organisation, and I've allowed it." Oh my! There was a real, just using that language made me sit. There was a great guy about changing culture. I learned a huge amount from him, and I think one of the biggest ways to do that, we've all experienced it from different angles, is the either the toxic person or the lazy or disingenuous, whatever they are, the one that's sat in the corner that everyone knows. They just don't fit with our culture. They don't, they're rude to people, or they don't get on. They're late, whatever it is. No one ever raises it. No one addresses it for a couple of reasons. Sometimes people are too scared to have that conversation. Sometimes, allegedly, this person's got special knowledge, and if we have a bad conversation, oh God, we'll lose that knowledge. We're all doomed, So they just leave them. So it tends to be either I don't like having a difficult conversation, or they've got special knowledge or something or other. And that conversation's never had. And it just drags everything else down to that. It sort of sucks everything down to that lower level.
Yeah. Something that used to keep me up at night is the perspectives in that kind of scenario. So when I was going through that particular culture I mentioned before, I was convinced at the time that there was one particular person who was being toxic, and that was the cause of a lot of our ills, our woes. But looking back, from their perspective, it could have been me just as easily.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And that used to keep me up at night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so, I mean, we're talking about culture, and we've talked about quite a lot of the toxic traits and things. I mean, what from your experience, and particularly like in that 5-month turnaround you did as well, what can leaders do to make sure they are building that positive culture? What are some of the things they could do if they feel they've got a toxic one and they want to turn that around as well?
Yeah, I think the first thing is quickly identify those toxic people, stroke terrorists in your organisation, and one way or another deal with them. And that can be in two ways. Sometimes it can be just sitting down and having a conversation first of all, and saying, by the way, I've noticed X, Y, and Z in terms of attitudes and behaviours. That was always the thing I talked about. I'm not particularly happy with what I'm seeing with that attitude and this behaviour, and give them examples, real tangible examples. Explain that to me. What I'm seeing, is that fair? Is there something behind that? I don't. So I always took it from a curious, not an, your attitude's awful, your behaviour, well, any more of this, you're out. It was always, here's an observation, talk to me about it. Occasionally you get all sorts of interesting stories, things have happened at home, all sorts of other stuff, or I've been let down many times by the boss before, and all sorts of things pour out, and they literally just pour out. And you can deal with that in a positive way and actually switch somebody sort of back on. Sometimes you've got no choice but to actually have that difficult conversation with people and take it in a different direction. I found it sort of went one of two ways. Either somebody poured out a load of stuff and you can help them with that and actually turn somebody back on and be so powerful in the organisation that was switched off for various reasons, or you start having a more difficult conversation about disciplinaries and things like that. But and certainly, and then the other thing is the people that I spoke about before that sort of lurking in the business that are a bit lazy and or whatever the issue is making sure that everyone has at least monthly one-to-one, which is sacrosanct. One of the things that used to drive me potty is some people used to put the date in the diary and they go, oh, I've moved the date, sorry, or something else has come up, which basically says, you're not important. I've got more important stuff than you having my one-to-one with you. So that, for me, that unless there was like a family crisis, that one-to-one was in the diary, nothing moved it, nothing. And the one-to-one for me should be a series of questions about all sorts of things, which is two-way, but also that attitude and behaviours thing. So I used to just share with people, by the way, I noticed the other day you did such and such, bang on with the values, really appreciate that, thank you, your behaviour was outstanding, and actually recording it, written down, and just that word, I noticed, is really powerful. Think, wow. So if it's something positive, people think, wow, you did actually notice. I didn't realise. I'd try to do it in the moment if I could as well. But so you've got that track record of you're doing a good job. It should never be a surprise. I mean, some places I got to, they waited 12 months to sit down with someone and say, you've done a good job. Thinking, oh, I had wondered. Equally, if you're not doing so well, you're having that conversation again in a smaller way. And I noticed that thing the other day you did, same sort of conversation, what should I read into that? But it's also recorded. So there should never be, if you do have to get to the ultimate sanction of removing someone from the business, it should not be a surprise. So many businesses ignore it. There's a downturn or something in the business to go, right, I'm going to put him, them on the list because they've been a problem for about a year or two, and now's our opportunity. Thinking, really? That conversation should have been had a long time ago, and it should never have been a surprise. And that poor individual might well be thinking, yeah, why am I on the list? No one's ever told me I did a bad job or didn't do it well. So that was always key to me, and just wandering around and just talking to people. I was always talking to people about. So every 2 weeks I'd share. I had a one-page unique way of putting the purpose of the business, the values, what our objectives are, and the projects we were working on. I'm doing this because I'm trying to paint a picture of what it looked like, because I'm a very visual person. And I used to share that every 2 weeks with everyone in the business, and gave everyone the opportunity to ask questions about it. So if you get the odd individual, which you do, well, you don't communicate enough. Well, I'll do it every 2 weeks. Well, you didn't tell us this. Well, you had the opportunity to ask a question, and I demonstrate that I'm quite open about it. So the onus is also on you. So you have that sort of conversation, but just walking around and talking to people, you notice things and acknowledge things that people have done and come up with other great ideas, and you share those ideas. Say, Fred came up with this, not me. Fred came up with this idea. So yes, there's all sorts of, I'm reliving thinking about what I used to do, but those are all important parts of culture.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so with you on the feedback as well. Like the annual appraisal, like neither of those words is good in this situation.
No, and in some ways, monthly actually I don't think is frequently enough. But sometimes it's the practical reality of sort of being in a busy environment. I remember one business I was in where they had annual appraisals, and I was about to sit down with one of my team, and I'd only been there 6 months. And I said, Julie, do you want to pop in then? We'll do the appraisal now. She said, oh, you want me to come in? Yeah. Well, why wouldn't I? We're doing the appraisal. Oh, right. My last boss used to just fill it in, and we didn't sit down. He just wrote the thing out and then sent it to me in HR. I was thinking, you're kidding. You are joking. No. She said, that's what we used to do. So I've heard all sorts of horror stories over the years. So even the annual appraisal was just sort of diminished to this form-filling exercise.
Yeah, I always hated the way it got tied up to the pay conversation as well. Like, again, like maybe there's a practical reality there, but it's just, it's almost like holding someone's livelihood hostage to behaving the way you want them to behave. And I firmly believe those two things need to be disconnected.
I agree. I think it's very distasteful.
It is. Yeah. But also it doesn't encourage honesty in that conversation that you need to have. Because they just say whatever they think you need to hear to give them the pay rise. Because that's what I would have done. That's what I did do. You know, because why would you not? You want more money, right? Everyone wants more money.
Yeah. I've forgotten about it now. Actually, when I was in that first sales job, so I'd only been working for about 4 years, and I remember going into my boss once along the lines of, by the way, Peter, I want a pay rise of X. And he sort of looked at me and went, it was quite a big number. And I said, actually, I'm being really kind to you, because these are all the things I've done. And I listed them all out, which you've never mentioned, by the way, Peter. You've just ignored them. And these are all the things I've done. And actually, this really should equate to someone on this sort of salary. So I'm actually doing you a favour by not asking for more. And it'd be really good in the future if you do actually notice these things and you mention it to me. And he was like, his face was just, I did actually get a massive pay rise.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And I think it changed. Well, it did change his attitude. He did start on that. But I thought, hang on, you know, I'm doing all this great stuff. Nothing, not a word. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, which underlines what you're saying just now. And I think that's the key thing for me with feedback. Like, we can talk about how it needs to be specific and measurable and relevant, all these other things like SMART goals and all of that. For me, it's the T that is always crucial. And this is for objectives, for planning for the future, but also for feedback and recognizing people's contribution. And it's got to be timely. Like, you can't give it a year and then just sit people down in the room, either for good or bad feedback, and just say, right, this is all the list of things I've noticed this year. Because first of all, like, unless you're keeping the list, you'll have forgotten about at least half of it by the time you get to that annual point. And second of all, like, if you are keeping the list, why not just, instead of writing it down, say something, or both, just do it at the time. Like, it makes so much more sense. And when we're talking about for building cultures as well, it is that routine, everyday, the repetitive stuff that builds a culture. You can't do it once a year. It's got to be frequent and relevant. And definitely.
So there's a guy who's been on the podcast a few times, and I've read his book as well, and I absolutely love his approach to leadership. His name's Drew Dudley. And one of the things he has is his book is all about everyday leadership, basically. But he holds himself, and I've seen him do this, he holds himself to a daily standard. So there's key behaviors he will do every single day as to display leadership. And one of those is recognizing the leadership of others. And I love that as well. And it's exactly this sort of thing, isn't it? It's recognizing something that somebody's contributed to the organization. And I fair play to him for doing that every single day. I know he does, but wow, that's a commitment.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's one of the things I didn't do enough of, but I did occasionally, is I had a little list of a booklet of thank you notes in my drawer. So I used to write personal thank you notes.
It's nice, yeah.
And when I did Christmas cards, which I really don't like doing, but I always put a very personal note about, I really appreciate you did X, Y, Z this year. That, you know, what you did here was outstanding. Really looking forward to more of that, because to me that was important. And it was that moment just to pause and think, rather than just, you know, it's a Christmas card to Fred and the family. Is that sort of very personal thing. But you struck on something else there that I thought about. So I've always been a fan of smart objectives, particularly the engineer in me likes the structure of that. It's all good, tangible stuff.
Me too, yeah.
And I know I've done very well with those in the past, but then I had a bit of an epiphany. Because there's two ways you can do smart objectives. One is outcome-based, one is process-based. So what I mean by that, let's take something like sales as a classic example. So your objective might be, I don't know, you're going to achieve £30 million worth of sales by the end of the year in these particular regions, and doing it this way. You can put all the nice stuff in there. So that's outcome-based. So the answer is digital. It's yes or no. We sit down, we have a chat. Oh, David, you know, that 30 million, you're a long way off, aren't you? It's not going well, is it? and that type of conversation. Or it goes the other way. And so the other conversation is, oh, it's gone really well, David. Congratulations. But it's a digital outcome. And if you're having those conversations monthly and it's not going well, you're just having a very negative conversation. You're feeling, God, I'm still struggling. I'm not getting it. Whereas if it's process-based, so you sit down and say, to get to that 30 million, I know on average, each bit of business I get is about £1 million. So I need 30 pieces of business. So process objective. So I'm a great fan of that, because you can then have a conversation about, well, first of all, have you actually got a process to meet this objective? Because some people haven't. They haven't got a Scooby-Doo how they're going to do it. It's thinking, well, I did it last year, so I'll be all right next year. I'll be fine. So that, but it has a more sensible discussion. And it might be about, do you need some training support on this part of the process, or is there? So you have a better conversation rather than a digital outcome one of you either on track for your target or you're not. And you know, like if you're not, and that just puts more stress on people. And stress is an interesting thing. So I instinctually knew something about this when I was in my 20s, and then I learnt the science about it. So another story, if I may, we had a line stop in the loudspeaker manufacturer, and we were supplying the automotive industry. And in those days, they had a lovely thing where they charge you £100,000 a minute if you stop their line. So it sort of focuses the mind.
I bet. Yeah.
we had a little bit of stop. It wasn't going to be an instant stop. So when a line stops, you can, get to a catastrophic cost. So my engineering boss saw me trying to fix this line issue, we're talking to the line operators and the production engineer people. But what he saw was me laughing and joking. And he didn't say anything because he's one of these sort of people. But he just gave me a bit of a look. So I was a bit more bolshy when I was younger. So I sort of turned around and said, Steve, is there a problem? He went, no, not really. I said, are you referring to the fact that I'm laughing and joking? He went, might be. I said, well, you've got two choices, Steve. Would you like me to fix this problem in 3 hours or in under an hour? He said, well, obviously under an hour. Great. Let me carry on laughing and joking because I'll be more creative. I'll come up with the answers. If you want me to sit in here in sheer terror and worry about the consequences of this line stopping, it'll take you 3 hours. That's what you're witnessing. I fixed it in 45 minutes. And it took me, I wasn't until in my 40s when I was speaking to an expert on stress, and he said, when you get stressed, because of your fight and flight system, it diverts blood in all sorts of interesting places. So it takes blood away from your prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking things. So your IQ drops 10 or 15 points. I don't know about you. I can't afford to lose that. So I was like horrified. And it also does the thing that we're familiar with. Sometimes you forget things, or you you like this nervous because it focuses on the last time you were in this same jeopardy and gives you that memory to help you get out of the pickle that you're in, which is of no practical use in the modern world. And it's also things like suppresses your immune system, and that's why your digestive system sometimes feel a bit icky because it affects that. But yeah, so I realised actually having stressed people reduces your creativity and productivity. You're actually damaging the output of the business.
Absolutely, and damaging the people as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
When you really think about that and you understand the science behind it and the physiological reactions, and then you look at things like burnout and the, I think well documented by this point, at least in what I've read anyway, like the health effects of long-term sustained stress.
Yeah.
And then you hear bosses say, well, it's just part of the job, stress is it, deal with it. That for me just doesn't add up at all.
No. I mean, it's there is some science to have a little bit of stress actually does.
Yeah, it's the sustained period for me.
Yeah.
That's the key bit, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it does do some rather interesting sort of damage, and this it has the opposite effect of what I was talking to you about with the gratitude log and things like that, and happy habits, because it actually strengthens your amygdala, the sort of fight and flight alarm bell system, and reduces the impact of that key part of the brain called the ACC. That's the sort of logical. Come on, it's the bit of the brain that says, right, let's all just calm down. Let's just sit down. It's not as bad as you think. It's that part of the brain. So yeah, no, you're right. It's and this thing. I suppose that's the other reason I sort of got into what I was doing, because even if you've got a company that's got genuinely a wonderful culture, not just sort of free sweets and slides and all that sort of stuff, we're all carrying around a certain amount of what I call mind churn, fear, anxiety, stress, imposter syndrome, things from the past, whatever it is. And if you genuinely give people the tools to reduce that in a way that makes sense to them and their way of thinking, because we all think in a slightly different way, that has a huge impact on productivity and creativity and retention. Sadly, I've seen some well-meaning training in the resilience thing, and you get a boss that says, right, well, they're not working hard enough. Right, let's order some resilience training. Brilliant, excellent, tick. Right, I can throw more stuff at you now. Brilliant, you're all resilient. I'm thinking, well, no, you actually need some proper tools that are going to actually help people, and you want to do it for the right reasons. So that's my view.
No. It's like, well, I've invested in the life vests, and you've all been taught how to swim, so stop panicking, the ship's sinking.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. You won't get caught up in the draft of the boat going down.
Yeah. I mean, so what if I drive it into a cliff? You can swim. What are you worried about?
Yeah. No.
Anyway, we mustn't be facetious, as fun as it is. Right, so, I mean, that leads us back full circle, really, to resilience. So, I mean, first of all, how do you define resilience? I know you've already said you don't like it as a word, but how do you define the concept?
I think the key thing for me is a lot of resilience training focuses on things like reframing things, which can work and can be useful, but mainly works when you're in a good place and your rational brain can take control. The issue is when something triggers fear system kicks off, your rational brain has gone missing in action, because the irrational part, which is physically at the back of the head, is faster, much faster, and hijacks you and takes over with habits that it's got. Might be good habits, might be bad habits, but it basically says, right, this has happened, right, this is fear, right, we've recognised, and therefore habit X is appropriate. Off we go, let's deploy habit X, which could be anything, but normally isn't something useful, because most of our habits we've picked up before the age of 7. So, for example, silly one, but I find it quite amusing anyways. Quite rightly, in most cultures, we're told don't speak to strangers. Perfectly good advice when you're growing up. You're an adult and you've got a sales job.
Yeah.
So that's why, that literally is why, for some people, depending on what their experience was growing up, having that conversation, and also fear of rejection. Again, a huge human thing is to please the people that are bringing you up, to make sure they feed you. It's just a basic biological thing. So then you get a rejection in a sales job, and it's like, oh my God, I feel awful. It's like, well, actually, they just said no, and actually that means you can find the next person. So that there's all sorts of those triggers. So a lot of my work is about helping people change those habits to things that they choose to have. So I got a framework I call ACE. So A is awareness. So I explain what is actually happening and some particular habits that we all tend to have. C is about choosing a different response and a different habit, and they're easy to do. And E is embedding it as your new habit. So you've now basically willingly reprogrammed your brain so that when this happens, I'm now going to respond in this way. So rather strange. So I came up with an idea. One aspect, there's lots of ways I do this, but one aspect will be one of my next books, is 7 ways of thinking that trip you up and how to untangle yourself. So I came up with 7 common ways that often cause sort of discomfort in thinking. I ended up, ironically, using that myself. About 7 years ago, my wife went through a really difficult year of cancer treatment. She's fine now. So I actually ended up road testing my own techniques. And I was a first-class warrior before that, brilliant at it, which made me an excellent project manager, because I could predict everything that would go wrong and put something in place before it ever did, but not good in life in general. So I actually ended up using those techniques to sort of reprogram my response to situations. So I mean, in particular, catastrophizing, if I give an example of that, is a brilliant one, which I was very good at. So Mark Twain helped me with that. A great many catastrophes happened in my life, but most of them never happened. Which for me summed up our ability for our brain to go, this has just happened. So if I give a practical example, the boss has had HR in quite a few times in the office, and I've had some difficult conversations with him or her recently. Brains, oh my God, that, and HR's been in there again, and I think they might have mentioned my name, and the story's getting up here. So I imagine it as a balloon. So I often refer to it as sort of deflating the balloon. The facts are, HR have been in the office. I have no idea what they're talking about. It might be my promotion. And the stern conversations they've been having with me are to test me, to see if I'm up for extra responsibility. But my mind, so whenever I see my boss, I'm reacting like I might be sacked soon, and they're thinking, this is odd. I'm just about to give him a promotion. This is odd behaviour. So that's catastrophizing to me, but changing your response to it to get back to things like, what are the pure facts of this? It takes a bit of doing, but it's things like that sort of help people with.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. As you were telling that story, I was immediately going to say, well, maybe they're going to promote you. And that's exactly where you went. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, firstly, as well, pleased to hear your wife is okay. The only thing I would offer, so in my leadership brain, I'm immediately thinking, well, why are you being left in doubt in that situation? That should have been communicated to you either way. But yeah, I'm in picky.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to our earlier conversation, isn't it? There shouldn't be any surprises.
Absolutely.
You should know there should be this trail of conversations that things are going in a good place, or if it genuinely is going in a bad place. Again, it shouldn't be a surprise, because you've had those conversations, and they might say, look, I'm really sorry, but I am going to have a word with HR about whatever it is. So, yeah, but you're right. So it goes back to, in good leadership, should not allow the space or oxygen for catastrophizing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's back to like understanding a little bit about human nature, but also knowing the individuals you're leading as well.
Yeah.
Because some people are more prone to that than others, and if you work with them for a little while, you're going to know one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but yeah, I sort of slightly answered your question. Yes. So I refer to resilience as bounceability. So I've got a little diagram somewhere where I sort of show someone just sort of about to fall off of something, and then a set of cushions that they fall onto. So my definition of it is, how deep are those cushions so that they don't fall too far before they bounce back up again. And that's about the habits that you build in your mind, so that when your mind does trip off into sort of fight, flight, and the old habits, it knows how to recover quite quickly, because you've now effectively programmed it in a way that you want. But it's it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's and you can do that quite easily. More, and it doesn't mean hypnosis or anything like that. Because part of our brain weirdly responds the same way to real or imagined events, which seems odd. But think about a film that you've watched. You sat there watching a film. I don't do horror, but let's say it's horror, and someone's being chased, and your heart's racing. You're thinking, "Hang on, I'm watching a film. Why is my heart racing? I don't get." Or I don't know. It's an emotional thing, really sort of tearful, and you get a bit tearful in your eyes, thinking, "Well, it's a film. It's like, what's going on here?" The same way when you're asleep, because your unconscious mind is fully awake, your conscious mind is asleep. You have nightmares, and when you wake up, you think, "Oh, thank God, I'm all right." But that was just a dream. It wasn't reality, but your heart's racing. So that part of the brain behaves the same way. Sometimes it's referred to as fear is fake emotion appearing real.
That's interesting. So I've always assumed that that's about, because what you're watching is kind of invoking a similar experience you've had. Or, yeah, but maybe I've oversimplified.
No, it's that as well, because there is another aspect. So they've discovered a thing called mirror neurons, which is they found with apes. So it triggers the same part of the brain when they studied apes, whether they were eating a banana or seeing another ape eating a banana, triggered the same part of the brain. And they found the same thing in humans. So they think it's our way of learning, and it's also a huge part of empathy. So when you experience someone else, it does reflect back on you. So turning that into something interesting. So I did a post some time ago about how do you deal with difficult people that like that toxic bosses that we've spoken about. They turn up and you think your heart sinks. You're like, so you can't control them. Not anything. You can maybe influence what they do and how they do it, but you can't control them. One thing you can control is your response. So what I used to say to people was, and this is what I did actually with this boss of mine, in my mind, I was thinking, rather than, "Oh, you're horrible," either fear or sort of have a go back or whatever it is I feel really sorry for you. I feel utter empathy. Something horrific must have happened in your life that you have to behave like this. I feel really sorry for you. It gave me control, because I'm choosing my response. The one thing you've always got control of. It takes a bit of practice. It changed my physiology, because rather than being all like that, I was now feeling utter sympathy. And it can change the other person, because their mirror neurons will pick up, think, "That's odd. This person normally looks a bit intimidated by me, and I thought, well, they might enjoy that. I don't know, but they seem rather calm and sort of sympathetic thing going on. I have no idea why they're being sympathetic towards me." And that can over time, if you keep doing that, particularly if you have a difficult relationship with someone, changing your response can influence theirs through mirror neurons.
Yeah, I kind of wish I'd had the self-awareness to do that back in the day, but hey, I would certainly handle it very differently if I am today.
Yeah.
It is. You're right. It would take practice. I think that's an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Yeah,
especially when there's that sort of perceived power difference as well.
No, absolutely, and but I think that that whole response thing I got from a book I read about Viktor Frankl. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah. I've been recommended his book, in fact.
Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning. And I thought, if he could change his response in the circumstances he was, in a concentration camp, surely I can have a go in my relatively minor difficulty. Even with some, major things like family health and stuff like that, I'm thinking surely I can have a go. So that's where it sort of started for me. Have you ever heard of Jack Canfield? Possibly.
The name rings a bell.
So he's an American chap, sort of motivational type speaker type person. But he the engineer in me likes this, turned that into an equation. So the equation is O equals E plus R. So E is the event. Something happens. Someone drives their car into yours. You've got no control over it. It just happens. The plus R is your response, which you do have control of. It takes practice, but you theoretically have control over it. O, which is the beginning of the equation, is the outcome. So the outcome is influenced by your response. So practical example, oh God, this must be 15 years ago now, when they were building the Rolls-Royce factory at Chichester, two gentlemen that came over from BMW unfortunately drove into my brother's car. They just completely forgot the rules of UK driving. Now, my brother, being my brother, really seriously wrecked his car. I think it was written off. My brother's first reaction was get out of the car, make sure they're okay, even though they drove into him, and then bought them a coffee, sat down with them and helped them because they had a rental car. They had no idea how to deal with it, and taught them. And they said, "I can't believe this. We drove into you. Of course you." I said, "Yeah. So that was his chosen response. Now it could have been utter outrage, like I'm going to get a bit physical or shout at you, or so choosing our response had a completely different outcome. In fact, he got to know these chaps quite well, and I think they kept in touch with him for a while. So completely different outcome. So,
and that's a great illustration of most of what we've been talking about, isn't it? But the impact of good leadership in any situation, and leading with empathy. It's becoming a bit cliche, but the whole be kind aspect of it, understanding that, they probably didn't do it on purpose. So why should you treat them as if they had, even though that's, for a lot of people, the natural first response. So, yeah. And I bet the outcome was better as a result, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting you say that. I've always, it's just who I naturally am. Credit to my parents. I've just always been, kindness is just a big thing for me, and courtesy to other people is a real big thing for me. So particularly my toxic boss thought me being kind was weakness. And I explained to him once, actually, it's from a place of strength, not weakness. And it also doesn't stop me still making difficult decisions and having, unfortunately, challenging conversations. But, kindness, I think, is... There's a chap I got to know 2.5 years ago. Wonderful human being. Sadly, we lost him a couple of weeks ago. And he did a lot in the leadership space for decades. He was 86 when we lost him. And he was actually talking about not just kindness, but love in business, which is an odd term to associate with business, 40 years ago. So I remember one of the last conversations I had with him. It was interesting. He said that kindness is finally, people have said, actually, this is part of leadership. He said, we haven't quite got to love. And you can interpret that in lots of different ways, but he's just a wonderful human being. And I think it's such an important part, and that connection with people. I mean, businesses are people, aren't they?
Ultimately, they are, yeah. No matter how many robots you put on the shop floor, who's maintaining them?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And with AI now, we need to up our skills even more, because the AI is going to do the other stuff for us. That also makes me laugh, because when I graduated from electronics, the uni I was in were looking. They were researching AI and driverless cars, and I graduated in 1990. So when everyone's going, this new technology, I'm thinking, it's old, very old. So that's just...
Yeah, I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's certainly made big leaps ahead in the last 3 or 4 years, hasn't it?
Yeah,
even.
definitely. But no, kindness I think is sometimes misunderstood in business. But yeah, I think it's an important thing, because even when you're making those decisions, difficult decisions, if you're doing it with kindness and caring, it's a completely different conversation. And I've had to let go of a few people before, and they were actually oddly grateful that I'd had the conversation with them, and I was honest with them, and I was open with them. And I had one chap even come back to me a few weeks afterwards and said, actually, that was the best decision I think you made, and it's been the best decision for me, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And it was a very difficult conversation, but I thought all credit to him. So, but it's how you do it is important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many parallels in leadership, aren't there, and life generally, I think. And particularly about that point about kindness being perceived as weakness. I mean, another parallel, I don't know if we talked about it today, but we certainly mentioned it in our previous conversation, didn't we, about the stigma around mental health in the workplace and how that's often painted as a negative, or it has been historically a negative, that there's something wrong with you, that you're weak, that you shouldn't talk about it and all of that at work, when actually, it's 100% the opposite. It takes bravery, it takes courage and strength to talk about those kind of challenges in the workplace, knowing full well that's how they're going to be perceived and that it might harm your career. And I think, same's true for kindness, same's true for the more modern, I hate saying softer approach to leadership, but it's the only word I can think of. But that better way of doing it, as compared to the traditional, the autocrat, the toxic boss, the top down, all that, so on and so on, that we've probably laboured that point today already.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. That whole mental health thing it's interesting. I've had 10 conversations now with people that have shared with me. Sometimes it's just been in a networking call, bravely shared with me severe anxiety. I'm pleased to say, in a half-hour conversation and sometimes a 1 hour conversation, I've shared one or two things with them that they've then come back to me with wonderful emails saying it completely changed their life, because it more or less eliminated their anxiety, and how they tried other things and just never worked before. But the common theme I've had with that is quite often they lean towards me a bit, whether I'm physically with them or on the screen, and say, "Can I ask you a question?" I say, "Yeah, sure. Is it normal to have anxiety?" And then I sort of lean and go, "Yes, everyone's got it to different degrees, different amounts, different times in their life, but it's just part of how our brain works. It's actually, ironically, our brain trying to protect us." And then I explain the mechanism of what's going on, and I give an analogy that people go, and that in itself gives them relief. They go, "Oh, that makes so much sense now you've explained it in those terms." So I turn what's actually an electrochemical reaction into a sort of analogy. And then I give them a couple of very simple ways of dealing with it, and then get those lovely responses afterwards. So I set myself deliberately a very ambitious purpose 5 years ago, which will see me through. I may not actually get to it, but if I get even vaguely close to it, I'll be very happy. And that purpose was to receive 10 emails a day from people saying, "You've helped change my life." I get 2 or 3 a month at the moment. But that, to me, so when those people took that time, I mean, one chap said to me, he said, "I've been trying this horrible other stuff, this other technique that's approved by the NHS, which so many people said to me doesn't work." He said, I looked up our notes from our chat, tried it. It made such a difference. I've shared it with 2 other people. It's changed their lives as well. I just wanted to say thank you. And that to me is just wonderful. And that sort of ripple effect. So, yeah, you got me in a different direction with that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's lovely to hear, isn't it? And yeah, that's your why, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so it's that, and that links that curiosity and that deep need to help people, which are the 2 core parts of who I am. It took me a while to sort of fully acknowledge that and understand it. I sort of knew it, but to really appreciate how important that is and sort of realign with that, if you like. So, which, going back to the leadership thing, I think is also I think one of the important things is when you're comfortable being yourself and being authentically you, that's when you're at your best as a leader. Particularly when I first started leadership, I always thought there was some sort of blueprint of leadership, which I was sort of vaguely searching for. And then I was so busy trying to be somebody else, so I wasn't spending any time being myself.
Yeah, I mean, very early in my leadership career, I was actively encouraged to have like compartmented personalities depending on my context. Like the leader David and then the home David. And oh man, that did me no favours for many years.
Yeah. It's you reminded me of a really powerful thing. I took on a new job. It was the first time job as a director, as a divisional director for a big US company. We'd moved house, gone to the West Midlands, brought up in the South Coast, and so we had some colleagues round. And our daughter was really young, so as I always did and thought nothing of it, picked her up, cuddled her, changed her nappies, did all this sort of stuff, and did it in front of my colleagues. My wife, when they all left, my wife said to me, she said, "So I don't know what you're like at work," she said, "but the look on their faces." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, just, I know who you are," she said, and "loving you and just sort of being they'd just not seen that side of you." I could say, "Are you kidding?" "No, I said, "I don't know what you're like, whether you're like really sort of firm or sort of hold your feelings back or what it is, but they've never seen that side of you." And that sort of stuck with me and started to propel me in the direction of, actually, how do I show up at work? Is there a different me? Is it really and I sort of, it took me a while to, I suppose, to, on the whole, I thought I was being me, but not as much as I probably thought I was.
I think that's part of the journey of leadership, isn't it? That sort of learn as you go part of it, which I probably shouldn't say really, given what I try to do with my business, but never mind, doing myself out of work. But there's an aspect of it, and the mindset part of it, and that interaction with people. I think you just, to a great extent, have to learn by doing. You have to, like we've been saying throughout, really, you've got to make those mistakes, because that's really the only way you're going to learn, I think.
Yeah, no.
In a way that's going to stick anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a bit like when we're children, isn't it? Sometimes people tell you, don't do this, don't do that. But unless you actually do it and go, oh, right, now I understand why they said that to me. But before, depending on your personality as well, you might just think, oh, I'm just going to do it anyway. And then you think, oh, actually, what's good advice? But until you've experienced it sometimes yourself, then...
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It'd be good. I'd love to end on a positive note from the leadership side, because I think, we've talked about some great stuff today. It's been really good. I do feel like we've talked a lot about the toxic kind of leaders, though. So to combat that or counter that or balance it, I'm going to ask you last question. This is usually my favourite one as well. So it's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it could be anyone you can think of pretty much, alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, but it's got to be someone who, in your opinion, perfectly embodies leadership. So who would that be for you and why?
I think it would be interestingly a chap called Detlev. So I worked in an international business and I had two bosses, one in America, one in Germany. And Detlev was my German boss. The most interesting character I think I've ever met. If you met him, you'd think he was a really whimsical sort of character, and you think really there's no substance to him whatsoever. So but the fascinating thing with him is you would share something with him, some challenge, some issue that you were thinking about. And then we'd have a real laugh and a joke about some completely unrelated things. And you're thinking, well, this is fun. I'm quite enjoying this fun conversation. But it's got nothing to do with the question that I just posed to you. And then he'd deliver some really insightful, short sentence or two that completely succinctly summed up what I said to him with a really insightful comment. And you're thinking, how on earth have you just done that? So you've obviously just been thinking through whilst we've been having a laugh and a chat and then come up with this really profound comment at the end. And it was always an interesting balance of a little bit of challenge, a lot of support, and normally something you think, actually, that's just sort of spot on. And I've never met anyone who's been quite able to do it in the way he did it. I've always used humour a lot. I enjoy humour myself, but he was in another league. So yeah, no, I think it would be Detlef. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I feel like that's a sign of genius, isn't it? Because you read about people like that, who they can have that sort of the really high level intellectual stuff going around the machine in the back of their mind while they're doing something day to day, like having a laugh with friends and colleagues and just not really paying attention with the rest of their brain. And then while they're doing that, the answers popped out in the back. Yeah.
Definitely. He told me a story once that amused me, which was very Detlef-y, was he was having a really difficult conversation at BMW. The negotiation really wasn't going too well, and it got quite tense, to say the least. And he just happened to be going to see his nephew that evening, and as you do, had a glove puppet in his bag. And he said to me, he thought about it for a minute. He thought, no, I'm going to do it. And then he got this glove puppet up with his hand above the desk and put on this really silly voice. And they're all looking at him thinking, really? In the middle? And he said they all just burst into laughter, couldn't quite believe that he'd done it. He said, and then we solved the problem in the next 5 minutes. He said it could have gone another way, but it just completely changed the dynamic, got people to think literally in a different way. But that was very much sort of Detlef. And when we had a meeting once he couldn't turn up to, and we both agreed that I would take a cardboard cutout of him. So I was having a conversation with the customer. I said, what do you think, Detlef? I think Detlef agrees. Yes, definitely. So we used to do that a lot in different ways. But I suppose linking that back to what I do now, I understand that humour actually frees your mind up to think more creatively. You get less stressed. When you get stressed, your IQ drops 10 or 15 points. Your mind tends to, when you forget things, when you get stressed, it's because it presents to you last time you were in that stress position. So actually, I now know there's actually a lot of science behind that. So creating that artificial or not humorous situation, that actually is a very clever thing to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hell of a risk, though. And I mean, certainly with BMW, I mean, they're...
Yeah.
I don't think it's unfair to say they don't have a reputation for having a sense of humour.
No, it was, and it was that particular group he was with weren't renowned for humour either. I think it was probably about a €5 million contract at the time. So, it wasn't, it was quite meaty thing that you didn't really want to mess up. So.
Yeah. I mean, was it? It depends how badly it was going, I suppose, doesn't it? If it was just like a it's any worse, might as well.
But I think it's one of I think his assessment was it would either not have gone well, the meeting otherwise, or they would have just carried on collectively banging their heads and not getting anywhere. So he thought, it's worth the risk. Quite a character. But yeah.
You'll probably know more about this than I would, I'm sure, but I have read about this, like the pattern interrupt sort of thing. You see it in sales a bit, and you read about it in like negotiation and like hostage type negotiation situations as well, where you just throw in something completely random and unexpected because it breaks someone out of the cycle that they're in for whatever reason. So I guess it's kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're very right. Yeah, that sort of pattern interrupt. Just otherwise, people have their brain literally is going through the same loop, the same thought process, and just on this sort of hamster wheel and not going anywhere. So
I mean, especially in those situations where the emotions are taking over and it's getting very angsty, I suppose is the word.
Yeah. And I suppose then personalities come into play, politics. What jeopardy for individuals and things like that, but it just sort of cuts through all of that and humanises everyone, and suddenly you're all at the same base level of just laughter. So it doesn't matter what your title is, who you are, what your political persuasion is within the business context or anything like that. It just suddenly you're all normalised to the same level.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about humour, isn't it? It's like the great equaliser.
Yeah, Yeah, no, absolutely. It's quite a thing. But yeah, no, he was quite a character, and quite. He was also very good at having difficult conversations with people, which many people will avoid. But he was always do it in a very deft way. But again, that insightful. He'd share something, and you think, right, okay, actually, that's quite spot on. You've been actually quite politely critical, but actually, it's justified, valid, and actually, I can do something with that. So yeah, which is quite a rare quality. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And one of those things that only works if you are that insightful and you are correct in what you're saying. Because if you take a guess and it goes wrong, you've lost it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, and I think going back to when he was sort of having that laughing and joking, you're saying these minds thinking about it. I think in a way, he was almost like playing a game of chess in his mind, thinking, right, well, I could go this way, or I could go that way, I could say this, might be this response. He's probably going to think, right, okay, no, this. I think on balance, this is the best approach. Right, I'll deliver that now. I'm ready, and then he just. And it was. He always used to look out for people as well. I remember. I was in the office in Hanover one day, and God, this ages the conversation. A fax came through. Gosh, I'm very old now. And his PA came in and said, "Oh, it was one of my sales colleagues." And he said, "What's that?" He said, "He's on holiday, and he's sent his contact details." So he immediately turned to his PA and said, "Uta, you know how to file that, don't you?" And she knew what that meant, so she immediately ripped it up, put it in the bin. And she said, when Otfried comes back from holiday, can you book in so I can have a word with him and remind him from never to do that again? When he's on holiday, he's on holiday. I want him recharging, not thinking about work, coming back refreshed. So I'll have a conversation with him when he comes back. But again, it was for all the right reasons, and that, we worked hard, and it was a business we were under a lot of pressure to meet targets. But he realised again the importance of, if you're not switching off, you're not actually doing great service to yourself or colleagues or the rest of the business. You need to come back refreshed. So, yeah,
absolutely. And longer term, it very quickly becomes a place nobody wants to work if you don't deal with things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's nice to know you've got a boss that sort of genuinely supports that. In a very sort of tangible way, so also defend that space for you as well. So it's an interesting character.
Yeah, and a great choice as well, definitely. And I can say that despite not having met him because of all the stories you've just told us. Is he still around? Or?
I think he is. So he would have been. I reckon he's probably about 70 now. I would think. Yeah, early 70s. Yeah,
he's probably retired by now, I guess, isn't he?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. He was very successful as well. So he might have retired quite early. Actually, he was very good at what he did. So But and again, as you're saying that, I'm thinking there was many times where he'd very much defend his team and back them to the hilt, which is a nice place to be, sort of thing. So it was quite a character. Yeah, no, fond memories of him.
I can tell.
Tell. Definitely. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing that with the rest of us as well. So the only other question we have left that also got lost in the first attempt to record was, if anyone having listened to this episode would like to learn more about you and what you do and maybe get in touch, seek your assistance, how can they do so? What are the links and places they can find you?
Yeah, sure. Probably the best starting place is LinkedIn. So Matt Sturgess, 2 T's, Sturgess. My brand I use is Mindlocksmith. So if you see a Matt Sturgess that's Mindlocksmith, that's me. Website, www.mindlocksmith.com. Those are probably the best 2 places. And then if you go to either of those places, there's a free weekly newsletter I do called Saturday Solace, and you'll find the link to that as well. So a lot of people enjoy reading that of a Saturday morning. Get all sorts of things about how the mind works and different techniques and tips and things. So that's probably the best places to find it.
Great. Well, I'll pop both of those links down in those show notes so everyone can find them easily. And that's it for the second time, for take 2. Thank you again for coming back. and helping me out of the technical troubles. Much appreciated.
That was pleasure. Yeah, as a somewhat lapsed engineer, I'm used to technical challenges. So.
Good. Well, it's the first time it's happened to me. Hopefully, it's not going to become a pattern.
No, hopefully not. That's great. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, likewise. It's been great having you on both times. It'll be one time to everyone else, but for me, it's been twice. So that's nice.
Yeah. More memorable.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Matt. And yes, apologies for you having to repeat yourself.
That's all right. That's all right. No problem at all.
Thank you again, Matt. I know we did have a few technical issues, which hopefully I've caught in the edit and the listener and viewer hasn't noticed at all, apart from the occasional cut here and there in the video. But either way, we ended up having nearly 2 hours in conversation there. And what a great discussion it was. So many of the key hot topics, if you like, of leadership covered, as well as talking about that increasingly important mental health piece of the workplace too, and the responsibilities that leaders bear in that regard. Also, I hope plenty of practical, actionable advice there for anyone facing any of those challenges. So listener, viewer, if you would like to learn more, as always, check that description, those show notes down below. You will find the links to Matt's website and some of his socials as well. Do follow him, do reach out, do get in touch. I know he'd love to hear from you. And if any of the leadership challenges that we've talked about today are something that you're currently struggling with and you would like some support, or you just want to have a chat about them, you will also find links to get in touch with me in the show notes as well. So do reach out, drop me a message. Let's talk leadership. As you can tell, if you've made it this far in the episode, I love talking about leadership, so I'll happily do it with anyone. So if you want to be one of those people, drop me a message. You can also find out more about Leading with Integrity, about the work that I do to mentor new leaders or those in moments of transition. Do visit the website. It's www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. And as I remind you every week now, as a podcast listener, you can benefit from a 50% off discount code if you would like to join our Integrity Leaders membership. So that code is on the screen and in the show notes, and it's valid for your entire duration of membership. So if you join today and then stay for 50 years, you will still get 50% off your monthly payment. But no pressure to do that unless you want to, of course. Either way, I hope to see you there very soon. Thanks for being with us today. I hope you'll join us again next week when I'll be talking leadership, introversion, and more with my next guest, Stacey Chazin. So I'll see you then. Well, you'll see me, you'll hear me, both, maybe, who knows. Anyway, I'll be back then. Until then, as always, be a leader, not a boss.
You can hear me?
I can still hear you, but your camera's frozen again. Let's just carry on, as long as it's not disconnecting us. It is probably recording it anyway.
Okay.
And it will just upload, but if not, it will just be an audio episode. It's not a problem.